Good morning. It is Friday, June the 21st, a little after 8:30 a.m. This is meteorologist Shay Gibson with Sail Flow and Leading Edge Weather, bringing you a final forecast for the summer Sailstice 2024, sponsored by Ashley Yachts. Let's go ahead and put me in the corner here. Is the web page. And again, if you want to see the link to this forecast, we go to the home page, Skipper's Information, Offshore Wind and Weather. And this is where you're going to find the last forecast plus this morning's. If you're at the Skipper's meeting last night, we talked about some of the parameters for today being the swell heights offshore being the main concern. I think the winds will start to lay down later this afternoon, but it's going to get a little breezy here in the next few hours. So let's talk about where we are. So we have this tropical disturbance known as Invest 92L. It's getting closer and closer to the coast. We do expect, I thought landfall, it looked like landfall might be late this morning. It looks like it's going to be pushed out to about maybe 2 p.m. this afternoon. It just slowed down a little bit on its approach here, given a 50% chance with only marginally conducive environmental conditions to help maybe bump it up to a tropical depression at best right before it makes landfall. I'm waiting to see what happens as it gets over the Gulf Stream, see if it does any of that strengthening. But we are seeing on visible satellite here, you can see the vorticity maximum somewhere right in here. It is heading off to the east. I'm sorry, west in time, and it should make landfall somewhere between Brunswick and down this area of northern Florida near Jacksonville. So it could be somewhere right along the border. It just depends on if it has one more little wobble to the north, one more little wobble to the west. But either way, some of these outward fanning convective showers and bands are starting to make their way up towards the South Carolina coast. The only thing is there is some dry air to deal with, and we can see here on visible satellite with the composite radar included, some of the cloud lines making it into the coast are drying out, and the issue with that is we have dry air. You see here some of the warmer colors here represent dry air that it's moving into. So the idea of get some rain along the coast is good, but we, for the offshore course, we want to make sure that we're not going to be, putting sailors right into the middle of all that, the convection. And I think a lot of that's going to fizzle out by this afternoon. Real quick, I want to talk about where we are with the hurricane hunters, and they've flown in. They're flying into this right now. And what they're seeing is basically, weaker on the southern side, only about 27 knot surface wind speed. And then as we get to the northern side, where the pressure gradient from that ridge to the north, we talk about high pressure to the north, banking down into the system. So we have this sort of east-northeast flow coming down into it above the system, where we have a pressure gradient. It looks like the northwestern quadrant of the storm is showing the strongest winds as of right now. So we're seeing 28 knots. I saw 34 knots surface winds. That's one of the parameters I'm looking at. So about close to 40 miles per hour. That's really just along the northern periphery of the system. That doesn't extend all the way up to us. But if we do look at some of the winds, the offshore winds are starting to come up now. We're seeing 22, gust 29. Capers nearshore is 22, gust 27. As we get into the Charleston area inside the harbor, we're looking at 14 to 18 knots. Northeast starting to veer east-northeast now as we speak. We're seeing those winds start to jump up a little bit. We could get up to about 20, 22 knots inside the harbor. I think the offshore or the nearshore values along the beaches, the barrier islands, we'll see that backdoor sea breeze sort of effect going on as the sea breeze oscillations kick in. We could see 20 to 24 knots between 12 and 1. After that, after about 2 or 3, we start to relax a good bit. And I think, yesterday we talked about it. The race start at 3 p.m. for that first batch of boats going out. That we're going to be at least 13 to 17. We may still be in that 15 to 19 knot window. But going out of the jetties on an east wind on an incoming tide is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So the winds will be veering a little bit more east through the day. 15 to 19 is a likely start now that we're seeing that northerly gradient increase a little bit. But as we get towards 5, 6 o'clock p.m., we start to see those winds falling off to 14 to 18, 13 to 17, so on and so forth. As we go through the night, I'm just picking the Isle of Palms as one. I'll go ahead and pick the Charleston Corinth buoy here. And let's go out with some of these models here. So the idea is that the winds are going to fall off overnight. Big question is, are they going to get really light? And it looks a little bit more favorable. It looks like that southeasterly gradient is going to hold up a little bit better. The HRRR is dumping at around 9. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the majority of the model consensus is that the winds start to veer after 5, 6 o'clock. We start to see east-southeast over to southeast winds by midnight, 10, 12 o'clock. Winds only dropping to 10 to 14 knots. So it looks like that pressure gradient around this tropical wave is going to maintain itself for a little longer, for several more hours. And then as we get into the sunrise around between 2 and 6 a.m., we start to drop to those upper singles to near 10, 11 knot ranges from the south-southeast. So maybe even veering a little bit more towards 160 from 120 over to 160. So be aware that there is going to be a veering wind. Winds will be falling off, but probably staying modest overnight. It looks pretty favorable offshore for that to occur, where the gradient does remain in place. Even at the 41004 buoy, we look at it overnight and pretty much the same thing. So it looks like the winds are favorable. It depends on which tack you're taking on these, but it looks favorable as you head back in towards the jetties that you'll have a tailwind to come in on. So it looks pretty good overall. The only thing I'm concerned about, of course, is the wave height. So right now we're looking about 7.5 feet out there. As we get into, I'm sorry, a little bit more than that. Let me go ahead and just take a quick look at the buoy reading for it. So height is 80.8 degrees, and then if we get into the Corp website here, significant wave height right around 8.2 feet. That means with a little bit of a secondary swell, it's just bumping up from time to time to some higher swells. But the overall swell height's right around 5.5 to 6 feet, wave period at 9 seconds. So I encourage you to look at this as we go forward. I think once we get past the midday hours, these wave heights will start falling as that system moves into land off to the west. We'll start to see these coming down. So if we look at where's my wave thing here? We go right here. So we go into 9 a.m., 5 p.m. We start to see the wave height start to fall as we get into the night. And I think this is just a little bit over the top, 5.8. We might be looking at more like 5 as we get into 11 p.m., maybe 4.5. So I'm undercutting this by a little bit, but you can see how basically from right now as we go in time that these wave heights start to dissipate. And that's pretty much going to be the trend for most of the time. So just be looking for some big, 9 to 10 second period swell out there that you'll have to deal with. But otherwise, it looks pretty good overall. I mean, as far as the rain goes, I'm seeing a lot of these convective showers trying to pull into the coast and then fizzle out, right? Some of it makes it, breaches the coast, and some of the areas that definitely need some rain. It looks like a majority of these convective showers start to become more isolated as we get into the afternoon. We talked about this yesterday. So you'll still be dealing with some convective little isolated areas out there. And then by nighttime, things start to really fizzle down. And I think overnight tonight, you're probably going to still see some of these spotty showers. That's always normal and typical of southeast flow off the ocean. So just be aware of that for tonight. But the winds overall look pretty good. They look better. Looks like we may not see that 3 to 7 knot range until we get to around 7, 8 o'clock a.m. in the Charleston Harbor. May fall off that much, but I think everybody will be done by then as we're going with a short course. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I wish everybody the best of luck today. Be ready for some pretty stiff winds with some gusting into the low to mid 20s to start. Getting out through the jetties will be a trick. Getting on an incoming tide, especially a full moon tide, and good luck out there on the outside. Be safe and have fun, and I'll see you on the next race. Thanks, everybody.